In this episode, we're going to talk about how to overcome adversity.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Luis Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to sell online? Or maybe you've been thinking about it, but you're reserved to do it because you need a website, you need complicated systems, and you need to spend money? Well, I've created a completely free course that teaches you how to use Facebook in a purely organic way. This means no ads and no money are needed. You can use Facebook completely free. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com. Opt into my Profit from Social Media course. I'm going to teach you the free methods to using Facebook to make money today.
We are here with Bedros Keuilian. He is the founder and CEO of the fastest growing fitness franchise worldwide, Fit Body Boot Camp, and he's also been on Spike TV's Gym Rescue. This guy is amazing. He's overcome such great adversity, and we're going to explore just what that means. Hey, we are so excited to have you here. Are you ready to launch?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, guys. I'm very excited here to be on this podcast with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
I know that you've gone through a lot in your life. You've overcome a lot of adversity, and I'm excited to kind of unpack how we can apply this to our own lives. What do you think is one of the biggest hurdles
Coming from another country,
yeah,
and then coming here to the United States, and Bedros, when you came here to the United States, did you speak English?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when we escaped communist Russia, specifically Armenia, my father was a member of the Communist Party, and we decided that we weren't going to be communists anymore. And he wasn't a communist by choice per se. He was a communist because they kind of give you that opportunity. And if you say no,
kind of give you that opportunity.
yeah. It's a real. The way he explains it is funny. He goes, 18% at the time of Soviet Union, the population were communist members, and of course the whole country was communist, but 18% actually belonged to the party. And when they make this tremendous, what they consider a tremendous offer and opportunity to you, you're welcome to say no. But if you say no, your family doesn't see you anymore. You end up in Siberia somewhere. And so, like all of the people who came before him, he said, yes, it'd be an honor to be a member of the Communist Party. Of course, my dad at the time, in the late 70s, being a free thinker, he always thought about democracy, freedom, opportunity, and effectively being able to do what you want, when you want, without the man watching you. And so in 1980, he decided that we're going to escape. And myself, and I was the youngest of the family, 6 years old, and my two older brothers, and my older brother and sister, and my mom and dad. We slid into Italy under the veil of we're just taking a vacation to Italy. And of course, from there, we entered the American consulate in Italy and said, hey, we are political refugees. Would you take us? And of course, within 2 weeks, we were in the United States legally. And my father was, ecstatic to give us this opportunity. Of course, maybe he didn't think everything all the way through, because in hindsight, we could have come here with more money, because all we had was, I think, $87 or $88 in his pocket, one suitcase, because if you brought any more than one suitcase, it was obvious you weren't going on vacation to Italy. It was obvious that you were escaping. So one suitcase for a family of five. And we didn't speak English, and we didn't have anybody here in the States. Till this day, I don't know why he chose California. He did, and I'm thankful for it. But man, I grew up being poor and broke. And I always explain to people, broke is when you have no money. Your family has to decide whether we're going to have gas or electricity or water this month. Poor is more of a state of mind. And so I jokingly always tell my wife these days that, I may go broke one day by making a bad business decision, but I'll never be poor like I was back then, where we always ran out of money before we ran out of month. And we were, kind of looked at ourselves as, no one else looked at us this way. It was just kind of self-imposed as, second-class citizens in this country, But having grown up in that situation where you're dealing with so much adversity, from a language barrier to financial barrier to even moving so much, being kicked out of so many apartments because we couldn't afford to pay the rent. I went to 3 different elementary schools, 2 junior highs and 2 high schools. And all those things that I saw were a disadvantage for me and was adversity ended up being probably some of the best learning lessons in life for me, and which I believe have made me what I am today, which is a leader amongst the fitness and the wellness industry.
Really, some of those adversities are the building blocks to your success now. I know personally, having come to the United States from Medellin, Colombia in 1991, and I'm, in Colombia when I was born, Pablo Escobar was in power. I mean, there was other people in power, but Pablo Escobar had quite a reign over the country with the mafia and the cocaine cartel. And so I share a similar journey to you, although I have a little bit more privilege in that I was adopted and I was 8 years old, and I came to this country and people knew, I had some people that were going to take care of me and they knew how to navigate this country. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you've done to kind of overcome some of that history and that past to get to where you are today? Because that's a dramatic difference that you've made now, being somebody who's the CEO of the fastest growing fitness franchise in the world, Fit Body Boot Camp. You've been on TV with Spike TV's Gym Rescue. I mean, you have a lot of success and accolades, but the cards were stacked against you.
Yeah, and so that's exactly it. When the cards were stacked against you, all you could do is really hand wring and hem and haw about how if you just had more opportunity, you had the information, the right people presented themselves to you, if you had the money to go and buy the knowledge. But in reality, I realized I had this ability to thrive. And with many of my coaching clients and our Fit Body Bootcamp franchisees, we have these funny little terms we use, and I'd love to share one with you. And we always walk around saying that we are a cockweed. And you're probably thinking, well, what did you say? And in my mind, I look at who I am and what I am as a cockroach. If a cockroach made sweet love to a weed, this plant that no one is able to kill, it grows in your vegetable garden, it grows out of cracks, it grows out of concrete, it grows out of telephone poles, grows out of ice. The weed is the most resilient plant on the face of the earth. Yet we always kind of give prettier flowers the accolades, like the orchid. You don't go to a grocery store when you're going to someone's house as a guest and you look for a pot of weed to take them. You typically will buy an orchid.
Depends what kind of party you're going to. I had to say that.
And depends on the kind of weed. Well said, sir. But it's funny that you say that. But, everyone buys an orchid. And so I decided to start studying orchids because when people would bring an orchid to our house, it never seemed to really last. And as it turns out, just a little bit of too much humidity and the orchid dies. If an orchid is growing next to another plant and that plant happens to share the same soil, the orchid dies. If there's a little too much sunlight, the orchid dies. It is one of the most fragile plants on the face of the earth here, yet we all kind of want to be an orchid. Yet I realized you look at the cockroach and the weed, I don't know of anything more resilient than these two things on this planet. They could survive, Lord knows, anything. You have yet to find any kind of spray at Home Depot or Lowe's that you can spray on a weed and permanently kill it. Those suckers come back, and they come back with a vengeance. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I reframed everything that I had gone through as a adversity. I reframed that as an advantage by saying, look, you could stomp out a weed, you can pull it out, you can spray it with poison, and it will come back stronger, more resilient than ever. Well, I've effectively been stomped out, pulled out, told I couldn't do it. I've even been in a police helicopter chase, and I wasn't the guy in the helicopter. I was the guy in the getaway car. And so all those things as a young man that I had so much rage and anger towards, I realized that was all of the adversity that gave me the advantage because I just simply reframed it as I'm a weed. I can survive and thrive over any other adversity that's given to me. And when you reframe a negative and you go, it's because of this negative that this has happened, then you're able to move on the hurt and the pain rather than holding on to it and using it as an anchor to weigh you down.
It's a great reframe, especially for me. It really resonates as being an immigrant and coming to this country because when I came to the United States, I didn't speak English. My first school that I went to, not a single person in the whole school spoke Spanish. I was quite lost. First few years of school are very hard. I really couldn't communicate with people. In 1991 in Seattle, Washington, there really weren't a lot of Latinos, and there really wasn't anywhere in the schools that I was put into in it. And it took a while before I even met someone who had a Spanish name. And so that journey and that reframe that you're talking about really resonates for me.
Yeah. It's funny. My brother so I was 6 years old. My brother was 19 years old when we came to the United States. Till this day, and in fact, we're going to go visit my parents tonight, my wife and I and our kids in Anaheim. So they're about 30 minutes away from us, and my brother and his family will be there. But till this day, my brother carries a chip on his shoulder. And if you just ask one or two questions about, so you're from another country? Yes. And you are an immigrant. How was life when you first got here? Within the first sentence or two, he will tell you that people were yelling at us and telling us to go back to our own effing country. Now, he's held on to that, and that's become the narrative of his journey over the last 34 years that we've been in this country. I, on the other hand, looked at that as every time someone yelled at us. Now, let me tell you, I was the youngest in this family. So when we were being yelled at and people were chasing our family down, because you can imagine the early 80s, they weren't too friendly with, California wasn't quite the melting pot that it is today. Let's just say that. But I cried. I was afraid as a kid. But as I grew up, I realized that by overcoming that, I'm a stronger, more resilient person. My brother took that same event and held on to it, and it's a chip on his shoulder, and it's his reason why things haven't worked out for him in his life. And that crushes me to say that. He's my brother. He's my own blood. But as a great example of reframing an adversity to say, this is why I'm going to do better in life, because I've, just like a dumbbell against a muscle, I'm coming from the fitness world, I got to use a fitness analogy, just like a dumbbell against a muscle, the heavier that dumbbell is and the more you curl it, the stronger that muscle gets. I look at it as that the more frequent and the greater the adversity, the stronger your mind and your heart and your spirit get. However, you have to be willing to reframe it that way. If you don't, you're forever stuck with that as an anchor.
I absolutely love the way that you frame that, because it really is about how we choose to live in an experience and carry an experience with us. And 100 people can have the same experience, but they carry it around with them in a different way. And I just want to acknowledge you for the way that you've chosen to move through the world with the adversity that you've come across. And I'd love to hear from you, from people that are struggling with their own adversity and their own challenges in life. What are some really practical things that you would say to them to help them move to the other side?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because how do we move from adversity, whether the adversity is financial, emotional, it could be a heartache, passing of a family member, or a divorce that you didn't necessarily want and you were shocked by when you were served divorce papers. Whatever the adversity is, how do we get to the other side of it to use it as an advantage? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to break the pattern. In NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, they call that a pattern interrupt. Because if I'm in and do you guys have kids? Let me start there.
We don't.
Okay, so imagine
I've been a parent before, though, and co-parented, so
I
can resonate. And Kamala loves little kids.
Perfect. So, do I sense any?
He loves throwing in those sarcastic comments. No, I love my nieces and nephews.
All right. Well, irregardless, if you don't have a kid, you certainly, we've all been kids at some point. And remember when we stubbed our toe or we stubbed our finger, immediately our parents, we're crying, we're raising holy hell, and it's a big dramatic scene. But oftentimes, I remember my parents doing this to me, and I did it with my kids, simply doing something to get their attention elsewhere. Look at the little bird outside, or, oh my gosh, look what our dog did. And they immediately stop crying and they turn their attention to that other thing. We're breaking the pattern. That's a pattern interrupt. And so when we're in a state of desperation, we're in a state of panic, we're in a state of fear, we're in a state of anxiety, let's say we're in a state of depression even, if the longer we stay in that actual pattern, we go deeper and deeper into it. What happens if you just break that pattern? What happens if you decide that I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to drive to the beach? I had no plans on driving to the beach, But I woke up and I'm a little dark. I'm a little depressed today. I'm upset about the fact that, whatever, my spouse had cancer and she's passed away. Now, that hasn't happened to me. God forbid, let's say that had happened. And I'm human and I wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Now, I could either sulk on that, I could go deeper into that level of depression, or I can get in my car and drive to the beach and go do something for someone else. And this is where we have to understand those two things. If we can understand thing one, which is break the pattern, do something drastic. I'm not saying go get a tattoo or go shave your head, but break the current pattern that you're in that's causing this thing. It might be that you're sitting there in the dark, curtains drawn, thinking about the bad thing that happened to you. Well, keep doing that, and you're soon going to consider possibly eating a bullet. Or you get in your car, you get on your bike, you go put on your hiking boots, and you just go and you go and you go until your body chemistry has changed. Tony Robbins calls that a state change. When you change your state, you immediately change your physiology. Your body's chemistry changes. And so the second part of that is if we can create a instant pattern interrupt by just getting in our car, putting on our hiking shoes, going. The second thing is go out and do something good for others. See, the human mind is a very selfish weapon, and it's designed to be selfish for a reason. It is always looking for self-preservation. And so we have to be selfish so that I want to live, I want to live, I want to live. That's what our brain wants us to do. However, when we are selfish and we're in a state of depression or funk or adversity, the best thing we can do is go out and do something good for others, because that releases the happy hormones. It releases the endorphins. There's never been a time when someone says thank you, the person that's getting thanked hasn't felt good about that. And so if we can break the pattern, interrupt the pattern, and we can go do something good for someone else or the society or for our city or for the homeless in our community, we can temporarily get out of that state of funk. And we do that often enough, and we start creating a new pattern. And this is how we overcome that bridge. This is how we bridge the gap and get to the other side of whatever darkness or adversity that people are dealing with.
So powerful. This is something that I absolutely am 100% behind you on. And, it doesn't have to be even something dramatic or drastic. I know that if I've been really depressed and I'm maybe curled up in a fetal position or something, to just uncurl my body or just stand up instead of laying down, even making that little bit of a pattern interrupt, I find can be a big help. Or another example is, if I was feeling sorry for myself and a friend called who is going through a hard time, to be there for that person is a really great way to stop thinking about my own problems and, to reach out and help someone else. So, I love your examples, and it can be really easy to do these things and incorporate them.
Yeah. As my friend Craig Ballantyne always says, he says, it's not simple, but it's easy, right? In other words, when I'll use your analogy, when you are curled up in bed and you're in a bit of a funk, we know that it's, if you just break that pattern, if you just get up, if you just open the curtains, if you just go and pet your dog, do something other than the thing you're doing that's causing or that's kind of got you in this funk, you might break that pattern. It's simple, but it's not easy because we just simply want to stay in that position. But man, if we can just get up and do that thing, holy cow, what a difference.
Have you been studying this NLP stuff for a while? Because it sounds like it's something that you've really heavily utilized to transform yourself and to rewire your brain and to understand your past. It's something that I've had to do. And just the story that I tell myself about what happened is a huge differentiator between me and other people who have had similar pasts?
That's a good question, because I didn't realize I was studying or even using NLP on myself. I did it out of sheer desire to survive. And I'll be very transparent with you guys. The 2 years before we came to the United States, between the ages of 4 and 6, I was sexually molested for 2 years straight by 2 older boys in our complex there in Armenia, at the Soviet Union. And so, you imagine as you get to an age where you're a young man and testosterone's pumping through your blood and your veins, and you feel more confident about yourself, there's a sense of rage and guilt and shame. What an interesting combination to put rage, guilt, and shame together in a jar, shake it up and see what happens. You end up in many fights and you end up in a police helicopter chase. And so unbeknownst to me, that happened between the time of 4 and 6. but it manifested itself in me going into a complete self-destructive pattern in my late teens and early 20s. And so I realized very quickly when a cop has their boot on the back of your neck that, okay, this strategy didn't work. What else can I do? And so I realized there's always someone bigger and stronger than you. I might go out and cause trouble. Now, I didn't realize what was causing me my trouble. I didn't realize that there was guilt and shame and rage that I had bottled up within. It took a lot of self-work and working with professionals to get that uncovered and work through that. But I quickly realized that I can go and start problems, but there's always people bigger and stronger than you, even if they show up in multiple squad cars and the helicopter. They may just be bigger than you because they show up in numbers. And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6 foot, 230 pounds. And I'm not ashamed to say it. At the time that all this happened, I was also using a lot of steroids. And so I was fiercely strong and I had a lot of anger. And again, going back to that, you go, okay, this didn't work. Cops are chasing me. I've got a boot on my neck and I'm likely going to jail. What do I need to do now? And so you're really literally at a fork in the road. Now, I don't know what got my brain to think this way, that I'm at a fork in the road. Do I take the part where I continue to self-destruct, or do I take the path of how do I make things right? I don't know where that comes from, that thing inside, but I chose to make things right. And I chose to start looking within. And so as I did, I go, you know what? I've gone through so much, man. I've gone through so much as a kid when we came to this country. Had my hair washed with gasoline because we couldn't afford lice treatment when I got lice. Eating out of dumpsters. And if I survived that, and I always have a running joke with my family, I go, listen, food could be as bad as you want it to be. I can eat it and just get a little indigestion. Everybody else has diarrhea and they're vomiting because I've eaten food that's gone so bad as a kid. I've developed this immunity. And so I look at that as my superhero power, nothing impressive, right? And so I said, all right, if I did that as a kid, if I was able to eat bad food and get used to it, overcame that adversity, why can't I overcome this adversity of either going to jail or turning my life around? And that's what I chose to do. And all of that, of course, was a byproduct of pattern interrupts. That was a byproduct of reframing things. And that was also a byproduct of choosing who my circle of influence is. And so as I made those conscious choices and stuck to my guns, I wanted to hang out with my friends who were causing trouble. But I knew that I could very likely end up in another police helicopter chase. And so did I study NLP? No, I was using NLP by accident to save myself. And then I later learned, as a therapist told me, oh, what you've been doing is called reframing. I'm like, what the hell is that? He goes, well, that's neurolinguistic programming. I'm like, that's all Asian Chinese to me, man. I don't get it.
You know, that's the thing is when NLP or different modalities have been created, is they just looked at people that, like yourself, who were having success, who were changing something really dramatic into something else. They were basically taking manure and using it for fuel to create something that could, run a city, for example, like they do over in India, where they take the cow manure and they use it for fuel. So I'm using that analogy where manure can actually become something that creates flowers and gives life to something very quite beautiful. And so what you were doing essentially is what other people have studied to come up with these arts and these different ways to help other people who haven't figured that out or who want to expedite the process. But you found something on your own that is incredibly powerful. Kudos to you. It's just very inspiring to hear somebody that comes from such a past that has gone to where you're at now. Not just you're a husband, you're a father, you're a contributor to society, you run a business, you help other people be employed. To me, that's very inspiring to have you on the show and to hear the story.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We've been here with Bedros Keuilian. Bedros, is that how I say your last name?
Keuilian.
Okay, everybody, we've been here with Bedros Keuilian. It's been a real honor to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Thriving Launch Show.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
Have you ever talked to any Mac products and heard it respond back to you? Would you like to unlock the power of your voice? On our next episode, we'll be discussing the power of voice with the voice of Siri, Susan Bennett, so be sure to tune in.